Yo, what's up? This is James Hoff, here to talk to you about my tool Precomp Anchor Repo. So this tool is great for readjusting anchor points of layers quickly and dealing with complex layers, masks, and precomps. At the top half, 9 directional keys used to make adjustments to the selected layers. Bottom half used to fine-tune the way the calculations are made. We have calculation method. There's 2 options. There's Vertex mode and 4-corner mode. This toggles the content area box, which displays the layer content area of the selected layer. This button toggles masks and track mats. This button toggles the way keyframes are handled. And this button toggles collapse transformations. And finally, we have the settings button, which opens up another window. So the first thing you're going to want to do when you want to make an adjustment to a layer is select that layer. If you want to adjust the anchor point, use the left mouse key. You can do this for multiple layers. Pretty simple. Now, if you click the right mouse key, it will adjust a layer relative to the composition. So if I click this edge, it'll move that layer so the anchor point is right there in the middle on that side of the composition. Let's see how this stuff looks when it's all inside of, when these layers are inside a precomp. So in a precomp, everything's all together. And we can still use the anchor adjustments. All the edges are calculated. We can duplicate this and go up another composition. So now we have 2 levels of precomps. And it still detects where the edges are. And what this does is it shows the content area of the selected layer. So this triangle, left click that. It'll create a locked guide layer, currently hidden. It'll create a locked guide layer of the content area. This guide layer won't show up in renders, and it won't show up if you go up a precomp. So for these, you already know, like where the edges are. But this can be really helpful when you're dealing with precomps and you want to see exactly what edges you're working with. Alright, so if you left click show content, it will create a guide layer if it doesn't already exist. If you left click again, it will just delete the contents of that shape layer. It won't actually delete the layer. If you want to delete the layer, you can right click this button and it will delete it. Open up a new composition and create a shape layer that has a bunch of vertexes. Vertex mode will take every single vertex of the shape and use that to make the calculation. 4-corner mode will just take the 4 corners of the content. So as you can guess, vertex mode is a lot more precise, but it is slower, and 4-corner mode is quicker, but it is less precise. So there's not going to be any difference in speed when you're just working with a regular layer. However, if it is inside a precomp, actually let's rotate it first so you can see it easier. I'll just show you the difference. That's with vertex mode, and with 4-corner mode, you can see it's actually larger. And this is because the corners are up here, over here, and way down here. It's not giving as much precision. Another area where vertex mode will make a difference is if you're dealing with masks or track mats, because those rely pretty heavily on vertexes. If I create a mask here, it will adjust the content area to just this. Oh, mask's not on. Let's turn it on. It will adjust the content area to that small area. This script works with add masks, subtracts, and also inverted. So can move the anchor points to this area. Now we can move with position. You can add multiple masks. And just get crazy with it. And it calculates it. Boom. Go up another level at Precomp. Add some more masks. Create a track mat. Just make a random shape layer. Set it to alpha mat. And now if we have the mask and track mat button on, it will calculate this area. If we turn this off, it will calculate the old unmasked area. Oh, so that is the track mat. We don't want that. I want the actual layer. Move the anchor point. We can go up all these levels. Let's delete some of these masks so we have something to work with. All right, we're going to use a solid layer that has a mask. We'll use that as a track mat. Let's do an alpha track mat. Actually, we already did that. Let's do a alpha inverted. So there's a lot of stuff going on here. There's multiple pre-comps with masks and track mats. Boom. This will only affect pre-comps. So we have this layer here. So yeah, part of the layer is invisible. Now inside After Effects, if you hit the collapse transformations button, it will actually show the layer. And this button has a similar function. Ooh, let's turn that off. If I calculate this area with it off, it'll calculate it just what you're seeing. However, if I turn collapse transformations on, it will calculate this pre-comp as if I had turned collapse transformations on in After Effects. Like that. Let's say I have something completely out, like these several layers are out. Working at this level, let's turn off collapse transformations. So I can only see this one layer. If I have collapse transformations off, just uses this area. If I turn this on, it will use that whole area. So the keyframe buttons, there's 3 different options. Basically, you have off, 1 keyframe, and 2 keyframes. We have a layer that has no keyframes and a layer that has 2 position keyframes. Now, if I try to adjust the anchor point when the keyframe button is off, it will only adjust the layers that have no anchor point or position keyframes. So it'll adjust this layer, but it will not adjust this layer since this one has keyframes. Now, if I have 1 keyframe turned on and I try to make those same adjustments, it will treat this layer like normal since it has no keyframes, and it will create 1 keyframe for this layer. Let's see how that looks now. See that it actually adjusted how it moves. All right, let's go back. It's once again a straight line. The difference between 1 keyframe and 2 keyframes When two keyframes are created, it creates them right next to each other, and it offsets all future keyframes, so there won't be any jump or change in the animation. See, it's still a straight line. Can make another adjustment there. Still a straight line. So these also work with right-clicking. So if keyframes are off and I try to right-click, it won't do anything. If I have one keyframe on and try to right-click, we'll adjust there. And for right-clicking, two keyframes and one keyframe act exactly the same. So it just creates one keyframe. If you want to quickly create a keyframe, you can right-click this keyframe button, and it will create that number of anchor point and position keys for the selected layers. So if I have both these layers selected, and I right-click this, it will create no keyframes because there's no keyframes there. If I have one, it'll create one position and one anchor point keyframe per each layer. Undo that. If I have two, it'll create two keyframes. So right click. I have a bunch of expressions and we're going to turn all of those on. These two layers have rotation expressions and some position wiggle expressions. The green circle has animation composer expression applied to it. So let's see what happens if I try to adjust this red square. Right now in the position expression it says wiggle 0.450. Now if I try to adjust it, it makes the adjustment, but it also makes a change to the expression. There's a bunch of stuff here now, and you can still see the wiggle 0.450. If you're going to edit this expression, just make sure you keep the edits between this line and this line. And when you end a line, make sure you end it with a backslash. If you don't, you'll get an error. So just put a backslash at the end of every line, and you're good. So with Animation Composer, it also allows you to adjust it. It uses a slightly different expression, but it will still work. Make adjustments, Q, do it with all of these. All right, at the top half, we have a bunch of different settings that you can change. We'll come back to those in a little bit. Let's go down here to the keyboard shortcuts. The first keyboard shortcut, use parent area. This is probably one of my favorite things about this script. And it's the shift key. So let's go back. Parent, the triangle to the circle, and the circle to the square. So this one's controlling those. This one's controlling that one. Now, if I hold down the shift key, which is the use parent shortcut, while I'm selecting the circle, since the red square is the parent, it will actually use the parent's area. So now I'm setting the circle's anchor point relative to its parent. If I let go of the shift key, it'll go back just to normally adjusting the anchor. Do the same thing with the triangle. Using it as normal, holding shift, it'll adjust it to its parent, which is a circle. I can even adjust the position relative to the parent. So if I'm holding down shift and I right click, instead of using the composition edges, it will use the layer content edges. So let's move the anchor point to the tip there and hold down shift and right click and push this edge. It will move it to the corresponding edge on the circle. Move it to that edge, that edge, that edge. Same with the circle. Let's move it to this edge or even that corner. Adjust the anchor point. Use children area. So this hasn't been implemented yet, but it'll basically be the same as use parent area, but the opposite. Let's jump down to slide. That's the Alt key. So let's say the anchor point is way over here. And I don't want to adjust the anchor point to any of the edges or any of the corners or the center. I just want to slide it. So if I hold down Alt and I click one of these four edges, it'll slide it that direction. So if I click this one, it'll slide it to that side, slide it to that side. If it's over here and I click down, it'll slide it that way. This can also be used with right clicking. So the anchor point, let's just have it here. And I don't want to adjust the position to any of the sides. I just want to slide it this way. So hold down Alt and right click. Next up is ignore precomp. This shortcut uses Shift, Command, and Alt key. So in order to see what this does, we need to be working with a precomp. So normally, as you've seen, if we try to adjust the anchor, it moves it to those sides. However, if I'm holding down those three keys to ignore the precomp, it will use the precomp edges. So holding down those three keys, and then back to normal. Orientation. What orientation does is it affects the way the interface is displayed. By default, it is vertical, but you can also switch to horizontal. Content area color. When you create the content area box, by default it's slightly red. You can change that red color to any color you want. Now let's create it again and it's green. Calculate text animators. If you're trying to make an anchor point adjustment on a text layer and it has a text animator, this will calculate it more accurately, but it'll be a little bit slower. Mouse over help, if you have this on and you mouse over different options, a little box will pop up and show you what that thing does. Works for all these buttons too. Auto save on error. If for some reason this script encounters an error, if this box is checked, it will attempt to save your After Effects file. Force allow 3D layers. So right now, for version 1.0 of this script, 3D layers are not supported. They will be in a future update, but right now they aren't. So if I have a 3D layer, let's just make this 3D, and I try to make an adjustment, you'll get a pop-up that says, yeah, we can't do this. You can choose to not see this message again, or just continue. However, if you still want to try to make an adjustment, you can force it. I don't recommend this, but sometimes it will work. For this layer, it should work since there's no Z rotations or crazy Z offsets or Z parents. So it will work the way you expect it to work. However, if I've rotated it like that, and then I try to use it, it's gonna act a little bit more strange. This is because it's using the same 2D method and it's applying that to 3D space, so it's gonna encounter some errors. So I don't recommend using this, but you can if you want. I have one additional setting that I added after recording the previous tutorial. That setting is Vertex mode, layer maximums. When calculating in Vertex mode, if a layer surpasses either of these limits, so if a layer has more than 20 shape paths or more than 500 vertices, the calculation mode will revert to four corner mode for that layer. This is meant to greatly speed up adjustments that would otherwise take way too long. This setting's effect is most noticeable when working with patterns. Here we have a shape layer made of 320 pentagons for a total of 1600 vertices. Let's compare calculation times. With settings maxed out, all 1600 vertices factor into the calculation. Not too bad. There's a little bit of a delay. If we lower the settings, the calculation will revert to four corner mode, essentially calculating using just 4 vertices, the corners. Bit of a difference. But this difference becomes super evident when the pattern is used multiple times, like on this character. Each shape making up this character's body is using a different version of that pattern as a track mat. It's 8 different patterns that need to be calculated. Let's compare the calculation times again. So once again, max out the settings for shape paths and vertices. And it's taking forever. 10 seconds, that's unusable. Let's compare that to the defaults. And it's way, way quicker, and the same result. So by setting these limits at a low enough level, you can greatly speed up the script. Of course, if you go too low with these limits, you will always calculate using four-corner mode. And that's it. If you have any questions or comments, you can tweet me at jameshoffvideo. You can visit my website at jameshoff.video or email me at james@jameshoff.video.